Hello, welcome to another Tweedy Outdoors video. Look where I am. It's that time of year again, the winter solstice. Right now it is the eve of the winter solstice, December the 20th. My plan is to try and remain in the vicinity overnight to see both the sunset, not that there's going to be much to look at in a short while, and then be here until sunrise the following morning. The weather forecast does not look promising at all, I'm afraid. It is just going to be like this with a few rain showers, and I don't think there is really going to be much to show for the sunset or the sunrise. It's also a bit cold, so it's all right for you sitting at home with your feet up watching this on your TVs or your devices, but I'm stood out here in the cold. But I wanted to be here. I had this sort of strong compulsion to be at Avebury. It's 2 years, I think, since I was last here for a winter solstice. Skipped it last year because I think probably the weather looked terrible then as well, but I just really felt the need to be here. Cheers from the Red Lion in Avebury. This first became a pub in 1802 and is a conversion of an originally 17th century farmhouse. It has a, oh hold on a minute, this is Tweedy Outdoors, isn't it? It's not Tweedy Pubs. What am I doing? Out of absolute habit, whenever I come here, I always have a pint of their well water. And I was just reading the badge pump and I realised this is effectively a Green King pub, isn't it? And for all this time I've been drinking a beer that I thought I quite liked, and it was sort of something unique and interesting to the Red Lion here. But it is the generic Green King beer that they put on at all of their pubs. It's 3.9% ABV. And I think there's even something on the badge pump that says it's sort of specially selected, or it's not specially selected, it's always the house ale in every single Green King pub. Believe me, I know, I do a channel about pubs, which is closed for business for 2024. So no more pub talk today. Not particularly well attended at present. With the summer solstice, the eve of the summer solstice is almost as important as the morning itself. In fact, more so maybe. It's a big party, but hardly anyone here on the eve of the winter solstice. I think it's always like this. It's about 3 o'clock now. I think sunset is due on the dot of 4 p.m. It's not going to be anything to look at really, is it? I don't know, it feels like there's a tiny bit of brightening over there if you're incredibly optimistic, but realistically it's not going to be much of an event. So I wonder if I might be better off using that bit of daylight to start heading out and finding somewhere to try and cower from the cold for the evening. I haven't really thought this through, have I? I think for the time being I've decided to head down West Kennet Avenue. To me, that is quite a nice scene of the tail end of the West Kennet Avenue sweeping away before me, and the countryside opening up a bit. We have Wadden Hill, or Waden Hill, whatever it's pronounced as, over to the right. But it's just going to look awful on the video, isn't it? All grey and washed out and colourless and lifeless. Very difficult this time of year, as I found to my cost with the spectacularly unsuccessful Barnet and Whetstone pub video over on Tweedy Pubs. Very difficult this time of year to take engaging footage in weather like this. That's one of my favourite stones of the West Kennet Avenue, actually, the one that ended up orphaned by the side of the road over there. Bit of a undignified fate. Hi. This is the so-called Falkner's circle here. Not really much of a circle, is it? I think I've shown this before in a previous video. It's a single standing stone now, although there are a few bits of possibly related, possibly unrelated rubble hanging around as well. The weather has turned a bit unpleasant, I'm afraid, so I've had to put on some waterproofs. Otherwise I'd be in wet tweed all night. Nobody wants that. Not really sure what I'm doing here. I seem to be just meandering aimlessly. Hoping I might find somewhere to sort of shelter for a bit. It's all a bit open, isn't it? The area immediately around Avebury. Not much Not much in the way of woodland in the immediate vicinity. I doubt it's going to come out on the GoPro, but in terms of sunset, that tiniest, faintest little glimmer of, not even really pink is it, over there, is I think the best we're going to get. Is that maybe Chur Hill over there in the distance? Going to see if that Barrow over there will provide a few minutes of respite from the rain. Perhaps I can put on some more hideous waterproof clothing as well. Well, that was a successful operation. I don't know if you can hear me. The lav mic is so buried under all these layers here. I don't know what that's picking up. And yes, don't look tweedy at all now, do I? And it stopped raining, of course, since I've gone through all the faff. I should have recorded it, shouldn't I? It's quite a thing getting these over trousers on. Perhaps there's a tiny bit more of a glimmer of sunset there, nicely framed by this pair of beech trees on top of this Barrow. Once again, I've been trying to understand what it all means, not in a philosophical sense, well, slightly philosophical. The thing that continues to baffle me about this whole business is that the day of the winter solstice is not the day with the earliest sunset, nor is it the day with the latest sunrise. It's just the shortest day. And I think, as I tried to explain before in some other solstice video, it's something to do with the fact that we humans have attempted to impose this notion of a 24-hour day, which isn't really quite accurate in terms of the actual amount of time that it takes the sun to rotate. And it in fact varies by a few seconds, is it, either side? The reality is, so we have this artificial concept of the time of the day, the number of hours and the number of minutes throughout the day that we've just invented. And of course that does not map perfectly onto these, what do you call this, celestial phenomena, solar phenomena, I don't know, astronomical phenomena. So the day of the year this year with the earliest sunset was actually December the 12th. That has already passed. The sunsets are already starting to get later, even today on the eve of the winter solstice. The latest sunrise doesn't come until December the 30th. So in terms of dark mornings, the absolute nadir of that happens, well, 10 days pretty much after the solstice. It's a funny business, isn't it? Never really makes sense to me. Is that going to work? At least a bit of a sunsetty sort of sky. I think it's actually 3 minutes past 4 now, so the sunset has happened. This is post sunset glow, but looking over the top of this appealing Barrow here, over to what there is to see of the sunset today. That's your lot. That's what you're going to get for the sunset on the eve of the winter solstice. Onto the ridgeway now. Is any of this going to be audible? Very much in the wind here. See a couple of vans down there today. A few of their lights on. Maybe here for the winter solstice, I don't know. Perhaps they're always there, who knows. Still see a little bit of sunset glow over there. I think if anything, it's slightly improving. The sky is ever so slightly clearing over there, but it's raining here. Can you hear a word I'm saying? Can you see anything at all? I don't think you can you? I've found my old favourite spot. Hopefully you can still just about see a bit of post-sunset glimmer through there. Almost nice now. If it had just been a little bit less cloud cover, that would have been a decent one, I think. I've spared you the sequence of tent setup. You've seen that before, haven't you? But back to the hugely unpopular tiny tent, the Nordisk Lofoten, whatever it's called. It's actually quite convenient keeping these waterproof trousers on because I didn't really bring much in the way of ground sheets today. All I have is the thing that the footprint for the tent that just about covers the shape of the tent. So keeping the waterproof trousers on means I can just sit on this very damp ground without worrying about it too much. For tonight's dinner, sort of a tradition here, I think. I'm going to make a porcini risotto with a few other tweaks. I think I made the same meal, sat in the same spot 2 years ago, also on the eve of the winter solstice. I went to Avebury village shop and picked up some mead. I think that would be a good addition to the risotto. You normally put a splash of white wine in a risotto. I'm going to do a version with mead instead. Seems like an appropriate thing for the solstice. This is some dried porcini. I think the first thing to do is to get those hydrating. So to do that, put those into a billy can. sorry, horrible rustling noises. The whole bag of those can go in there, which I have opened in a very awkward fashion. This will also form some stock. Probably could be relatively generous with that, so we'll need a fair amount of stock. You know what, shall I be really sophisticated and get 2 hobs out? And if you can see that, is that in shot? I've got the old BCB stove here as well. So perhaps that can be my hob for my stock pot, and the other one I can use for frying. Bit of the old FireDragon gel fuel in there. If I can get the child-proof cap off. I'm 47. Right, I think that's lit. Feels like a while since I've chopped up an onion, so I just brought a petite one along. I think you would normally use shallots maybe for risotto, would you? Does that sound right? As always, this knife's not really appropriate for the task, it's too fat. It's going to be pretty rough, sorry. Normally for risotto you'd want very finely chopped onions. Not going to get me a Michelin star restaurant job, but I'm going to get this lit. Can go on there. Good old trusty frying pan on there. And some olive oil. And then in with the onions. That's what they're called. Onions. Yeah, good. Did know that. Oh, my hands a bit on that. Lovely to have some sort of eat sauce. I was worried to begin with that was a little bit not really cooking much, but it does seem to be getting a good old fry going now. I'm going to add in some rice. This is actually paella rice, the thing English people can't pronounce, which I know is not appropriate for a risotto, but it's what I happen to have in. Is it ready yet for a slosh of mead? Can you see the mead? I went for the traditional mead. They had a whole array in Avebury village shop. They obviously sell a lot of mead. There we go. Might as well have a slurp of that. I do have some wine actually as well. I have some Gevrey Chambertin of course with me, but perhaps as an aperitif, have a glass of mead first, see how this is. Probably better suited as a dessert wine, I think. Yeah, it is slightly reminiscent of Sauterne or something like that. Some kind of sweet wine. So I'm going to let that mead reduce, and that will of course be starting to cook the rice as well. Shall we inspect this porcini a bit? I don't know if that quite came up to a boil before the fuel ran out over on stove B there, but it's definitely pretty hot, isn't it? Look at all that steam coming off. So hopefully that's going to go some way towards rehydrating. Of course it will get a bit more cooking in with the rice there. I think that has absorbed a decent amount of that mead. I'll put in some of this stock now from the porcini. I'm going to open the wine, I think, while this is cooking. The mead might be better as a post-dinner drink rather than a pre-dinner drink. A bit sweet. Should we switch into Burgundy with Tweedy mode for this? I'll put a link if you want to see the full gory details. I was going to do some wine chat, but I think a more pressing need is to spoon in these bits of porcini into here, because they could probably do with more cooking time, for want of a better word. I would probably ideally chop these a bit, being a little bit cautious with this because, as always, there's usually a little bit of sediment at the bottom of this rehydrating liquid, which I don't really want, because that, you know, it's basically dirt. You're probably thinking with this risotto, it's all well and good using the rehydrating liquid from the porcini as stock, and yes, that will bring that kind of savoury umami sort of flavour, but where's the seasoning, where's the salt? So what I've done is, to keep things really simple, I've just brought a big wedge of cheese, and this is actually, I mean, it might be terrible, but this is a cheddar that is infused with black truffle. I don't have a cheese grater either, so I'm going to just roughly chop this into lumps. Not very appealing, and kind of crumble it in with the risotto, and I think that will probably do the trick. All cheese is salty, isn't it? Particularly cheddar. It's pretty loaded with salt, and this will give it that seasoning as well. I'll try a piece of this, see what it's like. Oh, it does taste vaguely truffly. It's not actually terrible. Right, let's light this one last time. Is that hot? No. And we can just give it a little bit more. I perhaps don't need a huge amount of this fuel this time. That might be enough, just one blob. Okay. That can go back on there. That can go back on there. All of that can just get dumped unceremoniously into there. And it will melt and blend in and look a little bit less unsightly than it probably does right now. Looking better already. Wondered if there's enough light there to film without the light on, if that makes sense, just from the flame. Maybe not. I think that's probably done now. I tasted a bit and the rice seemed more or less okay. Shall I lay the table? I've been carrying this funny little pocket square thing around with me for getting on for 2 years now, my camping kit. I think I got this from that Burns Night video in Scotland I did. That was getting on for 2 years ago now, wasn't it? A year ago? I don't know. Lost track of time. There we go. I don't know if that's in shot nicely, but there is my porcini, truffle and mead risotto. I can definitely taste the porcini. I can taste the truffle as well. Getting a bit of aroma of both, truffle and porcini. That rice is really nicely cooked now. And porcini all seems to be rehydrated. It's not chewy. It has ended up a little bit sweet. That's maybe inevitable. I've poured a decent amount of mead in there. But that aside, that is really quite nice. Hearty, warming. Not sure what else to say really, but good. I'm going to shut up and eat that. Cheers. Well, dinner is all done and dusted, and most of it tidied away. It's not even 7 o'clock, it's something like 20 to 7. Getting a little bit chilly now. I know I'll be fine if I get inside the tent, but this is of course the downside of this tiny tent. It's not really big enough to sit up in, so you know, I can't really sort of lie down and enjoy another glass of wine inside there. So a little bit of a difficult choice of whether to sort of tough it out outside or crawl inside and spend the rest of the evening horizontals. An interesting aroma of, I think there must have been some muck spreading or something on some of the nearby fields, just when the wind blows in the right direction. So. Had a few comments from people over the last few months lamenting the fact that I don't go camping much anymore. It's a peculiar thing, isn't it, on YouTube? It's sort of almost sadistic, sort of watching someone else suffer the inconvenience of trying to spend a night outdoors. I have to admit, it's just not really, the idea hasn't really appealed to me much in the last, it's been getting on for 6 months I think, hasn't it? Was it July? I think it was that time I did the Longman video with Mr. WC21. So that was probably more like 5 months ago, but still in the intervening time, I just haven't really had the itch, to be honest, to get out and camp. Sitting here shivering with a very long night ahead of me, more than 12 hours until any hope of a glimmer of light. It's yeah, do kind of wonder what the actual appeal is. Well, I've set up the sleeping arrangements inside the tent. It's only 7:30. I've sort of slightly ran out of things to do. I think if the weather were a bit warmer, I would, you know, be quite happy just sitting outside watching the sky. There's a little bit of, there are a few stars in the sky coming and going because it's a cloudy sort of night on and off. I did try and do a night time lapse with my spare GoPro, but I didn't leave it on long enough, so it was a bit rubbish. Reminded them, like, what do you do on these incredibly long nights? I guess just drink more wine or something. I've decided to crawl inside the tent. I don't think it's even, 8 o'clock. As an experiment, shall I see if I can still drink a glass of wine while sort of half lying down, half sat up like this. It's not going to be easy. Could be fraught with peril. Wine spillage in the inner sanctum of the tent. That's really not a good idea. Cheers. Tent cheers. Yeah, I guess that works just about. It's not terribly cold outside, but if I'm just sat still doing nothing, it's hard work sitting out there. Whereas inside with the quilt on and everything, it's actually pretty warm. The tent, I suppose, takes a little bit of the wind chill off as well, and I have no complaints inside. I don't feel particularly cold. Feet are a tiny bit chilly, but that side really not cold at all. Don't think it's going to get significantly colder than this tonight. I do have another layer or two I could put on if needs be, so I think I'll be fine in that sense. It's just boring. It is hard work this time of year, isn't it? But I suppose the good news is it's the winter solstice, so it's only uphill from here. Good morning. It's about 6:30. As you could probably hear and or see, a little bit windy now, which is a shame because it was there was a nice still bit in the night. I wish I'd taken some footage of that. I woke up about 1 a.m, took a look outside, and it was lovely and still, and I could see the moon and the stars and everything. To get a little bit more night lapse photography with the spare GoPro. I don't know if I've mentioned on this channel, this is now a GoPro 13. I don't know if the image quality is going to be any better for it, but I only have one battery, so I still had to bring along the old GoPro because when this one runs out, that's it. So I now have the unenviable task of tidying up the tent, packing that all up in the wind and actually it's raining a bit as well, so that's not going to be much fun. And then trudging down to Avebury for what there is to see of the sunrise. It's not probably going to have much to show for itself given these conditions, is it? The tent has done a pretty good job of keeping me warm and dry. Not even too bad on the condensation. I suppose that's because of the wind. There's been a lot of airflow coming through here, keeping all the condensation down. And this Tucas Sestrals. Tucas is the company, Sestrals is the name of this particular quilt. It's been nice and warm, so until the moment, in a moment when I get out, everything's been great, but as soon as I set foot outside, it's going to be a bit cold, wet and unpleasant. There we go. The camping kit has done its job though. That is the state of my tent after a night in a hedge. Held up pretty nicely. I actually think I had a decent night's sleep for a change. Well, I'd say decent. I mean, at home that would have been a bad, fitful night's sleep, but I probably, on and off, slept more than 6 hours, I think. Which is a record for me for camping. There was just not much else to do, I suppose. So I managed to pack up all of the inner of the tent without getting out of the tent, which is a good step forward, considering the wind and the rain. And pretty much all I need to do now is put the last few bits in the bag and get the actual tent down. I know this tent gets a lot of flack, but show me another tent that packs down quite that small. I do love this thing. It's kept me warm and dry all night, and it's what does it say on the pack? It's something like 560 grams. It's possibly a little bit more than that because I've got the ground sheet, the extra footprint thing in there, but probably under 600 grams there. Final check, hashtag leave no trace. Somehow it is 7:15. So I'll take that ridiculous hood off, probably don't need it. Somehow it's 7:15, but that gives me hopefully plenty of time to trudge down into Avebury and see what there is to see of sunrise. Probably not very much. Early morning stroll along the track back towards Avebury. Entering Avebury now. Good 20 minutes or so to spare, I think, in the end. Sunrise is at 8:11 this morning. There we are at Avebury. A young lady just walked up to me and said, "Are you the man who sleeps in a bush?" Okay. It's actually a decent turnout. The more ceremonially inclined, I don't know how to group. There's a wide diaspora, I imagine, of different people there down in amongst the circles. And there is, I don't know if you can see behind me, a good collection of people up on the bank. That's a pretty good turnout, I hope you'll agree. There's the usual contingent of photographers over there. I'm not going to have a great day of it. And the assorted druids, pagans, other different belief system representatives over there. And then in the middle there is the very English bunch of people who have a feeling they want to come here, but they're not really quite sure why. Just standing around awkwardly. As far as I'm concerned, the moment of sunrise has passed. I think it was meant to be 11 minutes past 8. That doesn't seem to have been an eruption of activity amongst the people assembled. I mean, obviously there's not going to be anything to look at with all this cloud cover. We're not going to get a peak, I'm afraid. I'm very tempted to call it a day at that. There is a bus in about 5 minutes. That might be a lot. I mean, I guess I successfully wild camped, longest night of the year. It was all right. I actually managed to get some sleep. Didn't freeze to death. Tent didn't blow away. Made a nice meal. Probably I would rather have been sat at home on the sofa watching telly, but there you go. I'm getting old. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Oh, happy solstice, by the way. Merry Christmas, happy solstice, all the good stuff. See you on the next one. Just wondered if you might want some extra pathos on the end of the video. This is Swindon Station. Doesn't it look bleak? There's my train.